Star game. Cooper, appreciate a few minutes of your time this afternoon. Let's just kind of start big picture. What did you see? What did you observe? And maybe who kind of jumped off the page?
Well, it's a loaded event, and I appreciate you guys having me. But, it's probably one of the most undercovered events in the country when it comes to the depth of talent that Mississippi and Alabama churn out every year. And to come here and see 30 to 40 Power 5 football players is always a really nice treat. But for me, man, there's a lot of these guys that within my region, and I cover Alabama, Mississippi, and Tennessee, that I have not had the opportunity to get to see in person. But, the one guy that really stood out to me this week has been Suntarine Perkins, who was committed to Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin. And right now it seems like the Rebels are in a head-to-head battle with Nick Saban and company in Tuscaloosa. But he had an excellent week, and he was everything that, we thought he would be. He's over 6'3", over 210 pounds, and a guy that's a super versatile and dynamic athlete. He had a really strong season, but he showed it here this week in Mobile.
So, Cooper, you've watched these recruiting battles unfold, and generally speaking, when Nick Saban really wants somebody, he ends up with somebody. What are you hearing about this? Because Perkins has been a fairly long-time commitment to Ole Miss, and it does feel like Ole Miss is in a position to maybe compete on a level playing field with Alabama in a way that they haven't been able to in the past.
Sure, and I think the great equalizer here is NIL. I can't speak to this specific situation or recruitment, but I think Ole Miss has done a really good job. And I used to work with Chris Partridge over at Michigan, and I know he's a tenacious recruiter that's been on this one for quite some time. So I like the position Ole Miss is on right now, but I think Alabama, you would be naive to discount Nick Saban and obviously the way that they typically close with less than 2 weeks to National Signing Day. But right now, if I'm Ole Miss or even if I am Alabama, you're throwing everything you got at Suntarine Perkins. I truly believe he's a difference maker. We got our rankings coming out next week, and I think that's going to reflect he's one of the best players in the country.
Cooper, you've worked at Oregon, obviously a very different part of the country from where we are. On the Mississippi Gulf Coast, you've got Dante Dowdle, who is committed to Oregon. Certainly there is local interest. I don't know if local pressure is the right way to try and flip him and keep him in the state of Mississippi. So maybe two parts, because of your previous position. What is the draw for a kid from South Mississippi to go to Eugene, Oregon, and what do you make of that recruitment?
That's a good question. I think the draw is Eugene is certainly different, and it depends on what part of Mississippi they're from, but there's actually probably some similarities there in terms of Eugene really kind of being a rural part of Oregon. But the facilities that I'm sure you've heard a lot about are beautiful, obviously Nike-backed by Phil Knight and company. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but we're talking about a program that has over 17,000 uniform combinations, and it has a wow factor when you step on campus for the first time. But that being said, the distance from home, especially when you're talking about Mississippi to Eugene, and I think we've seen this in the past because under Mario Cristobal, we recruited a lot of guys from the state of Florida. How many of these guys actually end up finishing their career at the University of Oregon? That's a big question. We've seen a lot of these guys by the end of their careers make a move to kind of trend back closer to home geographically. So I think that has to be weighed. And right now for a guy like Dante Dowdle, I mean, the other thing is finding running backs or even athletes with the size and athleticism combination that a guy like Dante Dowdle possesses. It's really difficult to find those guys out west. There's one running back right now that really is similar to that. That's Roderick Robinson. He's committed to Georgia from the San Diego area. So outside of that, it's really kind of slim picking. But I think those would be some of the draws. The other thing out there is you got a staff that's really familiar with this part of the country as well. Talking about Dan Lanning, who obviously spent a lot of time at Georgia, Tosh Lupoy, who spent some time at Alabama. This is a staff from the southeast part of the country that I think does a really good job relating and understands the strengths and some of the negatives of being in the SEC and understands how to recruit against that.
How about a guy that I don't think is actually playing in this game, but a lot of people are talking about, and that's Isaac Smith?
Yeah, Isaac Smith, was a guy that I was excited to see this week. Unfortunately, he had an injury that he didn't suit up this week. I think he's been dealing with a concussion from the end of the season. And when you hear that, I mean, he's a guy that I've definitely gotten, a lot of people have been hitting me up about because he's one of the most respected players in the state of Alabama. Every time I've seen him, he's performed well. I think he's a true football player that plays with a SEC style to him. But, a downhill safety, a guy that's a three-phase player, gets it done, offense, defense, and special teams. I think a guy that's probably going to move a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage as his college career advances. But love the way he plays. I've talked a lot about competitive temperament, play temperament, the football IQ, football instincts really stick out when you turn on the tape of Isaac Smith.
Cooper, what's happening in these war rooms on campuses right now? Because the way evaluations are happening and recruiting is happening is so different than it was just a couple of years ago, with fewer high school guys being taken, more transfer portal guys being taken, because you've actually seen what they can do in a lot of situations on the field. How has it changed, and what is it like if you were inside a recruiting war room in Oxford or Starkville or Auburn or Tuscaloosa?
Well, I'm glad I'm not in a war room, man. That's kind of why I got out. I mean, I think this time of the year is crazy, and it puts a lot of gray in your hair. But I've talked to a lot of staffs around the country. I met with a Power 5 coach here in the last couple of days, and I think for a lot of these guys, they would have an issue saying this publicly, but I think they're just trying to be as adaptable as possible given the circumstances of how much change college football has undergone here recently. I mean, we're talking about the first time we've seen the portal open up on December 5th, that we've seen these windows, and you have over 1,000 names in the span of 24 hours into the portal. So depending on where you are and how many resources that you have dedicated to handle this type of traffic and react to that, I think a lot of programs are struggling with this. The other thing is you have to know your roster inside and out. A lot of these programs, as common sense as it sounds, they are reacting to the needs that they have. So there's a lot of things that have to be in place from a logistical standpoint. You got to remember, this is the winter contact period right now as well. So all these coaches are out on the road. Some of these guys are having to stay back as they react to some of the names that are entering the transfer portal, so they can then hop on a flight and go make their pitch to some of the hottest transfer portal names on the market. So there are so many things happening right now in terms of the way the game is being played. And listen, I think if you're battling for a top-end recruit, let's just say a top 250 player right now, and they're uncommitted, or we look at Suntarine Perkins, right, who's between Ole Miss and Alabama, even in the portal, to me, very simply put, this has become a bottom-line money game, and that's what we're starting to see. So if you're not involved in the NIL era, then you are at major risk of getting left behind if you haven't done so already. So a lot of things are changing. A lot of coaches right now are drinking through a fire hose, and it's kind of been chaos.
I want to ask you about two guys. We got about 2 minutes left. Aiden Williams, who 24/7 has ranked as the number 2 player in the state of Mississippi, wide receiver, just behind Suntarine Perkins, and then also a Mississippi State safety commit in Kelly Jones out of Clarksdale.
Yeah, I love Aiden Williams. Is the guy that we've gone to bat for a couple times. He's in my area, and a guy that this is the third time that I've seen him live, and every time I've seen him live, he's just an alpha type of competitor. The way he plays the game, he doesn't blow you away with short area explosiveness or top end speed, but a guy that is incredibly sudden and knows how to create separation off the line of scrimmage. And once he gets that half step on you, he knows how to utilize that big 6'3" frame, and he's got incredibly strong hands. So I love him. I love that marriage between Lane Kiffin and Aiden Williams. I think they're going to make beautiful music together. And then the other guy, Kelly Jones, man, he had a really good week, worked out extensively at corner, 6'4", 180. He will need to put on some weight at the next level, but trying to find guys that look the way he does and that can move the way he can are extremely hard to find. And it's just kind of ironic when you go to these games, you see more of them than you've probably seen throughout the year. So I think that's a really good get for Mike Leach and company.
Cooper, great